All right, so now that we have created our first React project, let's go ahead and dive into code and see what the project actually looks like. So I'm going to go to the terminal. I'm going to say Control C so we can just stop the server. I'm already inside the Hello React folder. And if I do ls, I can see all the different files associated with the project. I can go ahead and simply say code dot or a period, and it's going to open this particular folder, which is my Hello React folder, into VS Code. Okay, so now I can see all all the files associated with the projects and everything in the project. Package.json is the same old, meaning it has links to different packages and their version numbers. We already have a git ignore, which is also indicating that when the project was created using npx create react tab, the React tool already initialized it as a repository and added git ignore. Okay, so it did a little bit of work for us, so that's great. Then we have the public folder. Now, public folder has favorite icon, some sort of a logos, as you have already seen, manifest.json, which is information about different icons and such, that if you want to change the icon on the side of the page and side of the device. And index.html file. Now, you'll see that in this whole project, this is the only HTML file that is there. That's it. There are no more HTML files. There are no more pages. And hence it is called single page application, SPAs. This is it. This is the only HTML file you will see. If you go to the source, and you will be spending a lot more time in the source folder, and you will see different components over here. The only component right now you see is called the app component. And the app component is the one that's getting displayed on the screen. If I go ahead and run it again, so let me go to the terminal, new terminal. So now we're just using the terminal which is built into VS Code. And if I go ahead and over here say npm start, which is the same exact thing that we did before, it is just going to show us a page, the same exact page that we have already seen. There it is. Let's go ahead and take a look at this side by side. Okay, so this is what it looks like right now. And if you look over here, the word over here, edit, source, app, and blah, 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 and all of this stuff is right here. So this means that the app component is the one getting displayed as our home page. If I go ahead and change some of this code, so let's say that I remove all of this code and I save it. Now you'll see that React automatically refreshes our page, and now that code is gone or the text is gone. I can go ahead over here and I can say whatever I want, hello React, save it, and now you can see, so it's automatically refreshing when we change the code. Okay, great. But the question still is, how does this app component gets displayed? So if you go to the index.html file, and if you scroll, let me make this a little bit bigger over here. If you scroll down, when you will start looking at the body, you will find div, and that's the only div that is there. The div is a simple HTML element, so it's just there. And this div has an ID, which is called the root. But the ID can be anything, but by default, it's just called root. Okay? Now, this is fine. This is root. If I go over here and check out the code that we have right over here, if I say view source, you can see I can have a root right here. So it is getting displayed, right? Okay. So the question is, how are we injecting the different element, different control inside the root? So this all happens into a file called index.js. And it all happens right here. So index.js is the main file that gets executed, is the starting point of your React application. So when you run your React application, that's the first file that gets triggered, apart from the service worker, but we're not going to talk about that. And what happens inside this file is that it uses document.getElementById, which is the root element, right? Which is the root, which is the div that we already seen in index.js. So it gets that element and it injects the app component, which is this one, which says hello React. So it injects the app component into the root or into the HTML element called or with the ID called root. And that is why when we run the app, you see the app component getting displayed. Now, it does not really mean that you should always inject the app component in the root. I mean, you can create your own components, and we will, and inject it in place of the app component. But by default, when you create a React project, then React team decided that we will create an app component, and that will be just injected into the div element with the ID root. And that div element is right inside the index.html file right here. So that's how React works. React only has one page, which is index.html, and what you inject into the page are the components, the React components that we'll be building. Now, one of the things you will notice about this component is that it's simply a function, and it's called the name of the component app, and it returns something. Now, this is all fine. These are called the functional components, which is a future direction of React. But we will start by class-based components. Now, if this is the future direction of React, which is functional components, which are smaller and they are just functions, why are we trying to learn something that is becoming, well, legacy or obsolete? And the reason that you have to learn class-oriented components is that different companies, and most of the companies, are still using class-based components. They have not upgraded their code to reflect that they should be using functional components. And to be really honest, they don't really have to, because everything works just fine with class-based components also. So it's a good idea to learn class-based components also. So when you're working with a company that have code like 2 to 3 years old, and at that time maybe the functional components didn't really existed, then you will have an idea of, okay, yeah, I have worked with class-based components, so I can work with that also, and I can also work with functional-based components. So the output or the result will exactly be the same. All right. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to look at how can we convert this component or rewrite this component to be a class-based component.